Hello and welcome to Shooting Our Mouths Off, the podcast for James fans by James fans. I'm Laura.
And I'm Liam. And in this episode, we've got a special guest. We've got Dave Brown. Everyone knows who Dave Brown is, and he is one of the curators of Everything James. Hello, Dave.
Hi.
So, you are probably one of the biggest names in the James fandom. Everyone knows who you are. You've been there pretty much since day dot.
Yeah, so I'm not right at the very start because I was about 12 when Jim 1 came out.
No excuses, Dave.
Yeah, I know. But I first saw him in 1986, Salford University. And then just fell in love with him. And then from 97 onwards, when I had a job that paid me enough money, traveling around the country, watching them. I've been pretty much going to everything I can since then. Fortunate enough, I set a website up in 99 called One of the Three that sort of become a bit of a labour of love. And that's sort of, there's everything on there, every gig that people have a record of, set lists, lyrics, all the songs, all the releases. So it's sort of a treasure trove, lots of videos. And we updated, who did an amazing job on teaching me WordPress. So we could update it from a site that basically was in front page and had like sparkly purple background, flashing daisies, really sort of old school thing. And I sort of got involved. I sort of became friends with Tim in 97. I wrote an article in a fanzine called Change of Scenery that was quite critical of them. So that was the time when the band weren't getting on particularly well. And things were, Larry had left, Adrian had come in, and they weren't doing things like changing the set list around, which they'd done, historically and do now. They'd put out, those 3 CD box sets of the singles from Whiplash with all those really terrible remixes. So I wrote an article that was quite critical of it. And Tim sent somebody out to get me at Brixton on the Best Of tour and said he wanted to issue a reply. Then I went backstage, shitting myself. And he basically said he agreed with most of what I wrote, but it was where the band were at that point in time. And we became friends. So, he phoned me up occasionally and asked me about something. So let's sit down 98. And the band weren't keen on that, but because Millionaires had been delayed, the label wanted something to put out. And he asked me what I thought about it. And I said, well, as a fan, as long as the beast, I think people would be okay with it. And I suggested a couple of things like the China Girl cover and the GLR version of What For, and they ended up on the release, which was a big surprise because I was like, oh, God, someone's listened to me. And at that point, it was, they were sort of my musical heroes. I'd go and watch them 7, 8 times a tour. We travelled around the Best Of tour. And then we just became friends. And when he came out with Bone in 2004, I offered to do his website for him. It was a pretty basic sort of website, but it worked for that album. Thankfully, the cover looked like a bit of a mismatch of things, and my web design skills were about the same level. Although the cover was intentional, my web skills probably unintentional. And then once they got back together in 2007, they asked me to sort of leak to the fan community that something was coming, which was nice. And then really sort of as time went on, I got asked by Universal to be involved in the Gathering Sound in 2010. So helped with the track listing at the studio and the live versions, the live CDs that are in that. and with the booklet. So I've got a piece in the booklet alongside, the band and people like Michael Stipe, Gordon Strachan, people like that, which was really nice. And then when they released the Delayed box, I wasn't too involved in that initially. And then the Super Deluxe version had this disc of demos and stuff and jams. And some of them had already been released on the Gathering Sound. And no one had picked that up till I sort of went, well, that's been out before. I know that one. So then I went, right, you need to be more involved in this type of thing. So I was involved in was the Greenpeace Record Store Day, release in 2016, which basically was on the Universal listing, and it just had a date on it. And I knew, because I have this ridiculous ability to recall dates of things, although I can't remember what I did yesterday at work, that was the date of the gig, the Greenpeace gig, that was the acoustic gig that they did that was recorded by Greenpeace using solar power. So we pulled that from the archive and we listened to it. It was like it was the whole gig. And Ring the Bells from that gig had been released on the Greenpeace album. And we're like, okay, this needs to come out. So that ended up being a Record Store Day release. And then for the last sort of 6 or 7 years, we've been working on things with a back catalogue that, haven't come out yet. That I can't really talk about till they come out. But we've been working on a few things. The final reissues sort of came out in 2017. And then the idea for this Nothing But Love collection came up when they were talking about the documentary. And I think Tim said in interviews that there's a deal that the best of is sort of comes with the documentary as part of a package with Universal. And so the last sort of 18 months really on, which sounds like a very long time, but things don't necessarily move as quickly as you like in the music industry.
No.
The band are busy, the label have got other priorities. You've got to find a time in the schedule for the album to come out. And obviously I've got a day job as well, which doesn't help. So that's really sort of, it's been a long process in terms of starting basically with a list of singles. And that's what we started off with, version 1 of the spreadsheet. And then we basically worked through and said, okay, which ones need to come off, which ones need to stay on. And then the band said they wanted some deep cuts on. So they gave me a long list. And some of those made it on, some didn't, because we are limited by space. 5 LP is 6 songs short of the 3 CD, but that's literally because we can't fit more than 52 songs on a 5 LP box set. We could have done a 6, but you then put in another 15 tracks. And been very wary about pricing people out of things, which is really difficult because everything's very expensive these days.
Yeah.
And the band have to make a living as well. So the 5 was sort of a compromise. Ideally, we would have liked 6, or I'd have liked 6, at least. And then the two releases would have matched. And then we had a 2 LP as well. Through all sorts of things, we had a 1 LP, which would have been the most difficult thing in the world to put a track list into. An 11, 12 track Best of James, you'd be leaving out some pretty massive songs.
Yeah, definitely.
Or you'd end up being unrepresentative of the whole of the period that they've been around as a band. And I think it's key. They were around 18 years, from 83 to 2001 releasing material. And then they've been around 2007 to 2025, another sort of 18 years. So it feels like a very nice symmetry. of the thing coming out.
Yeah, you definitely wouldn't have been able to do it on one vinyl. You'd have
No.
to mix like complete albums.
Yeah, no, I mean the 2 LP was really difficult. The label had an idea of what they wanted, which was obviously very, very heavily weighted towards the 1990 to 2001, and myself and the band would be more like, well, no, it needs sensitive. So things like Destiny Calling, which is not one of my favourite songs, in fact one of my least favourite songs. The label were like, that's the 12th most streamed James song. So if you were doing if you were doing a best of that was literally the top streamed songs, you'd have a certain sort of set list. But we argued originally, and Leviathan was on the track listing right up to Nick, because I'd gone, well, look, Leviathan streamed like 3 million in 5 years, and Destiny Calling's done 5 million in 25 years. Ratio-wise, Leviathan is streaming more. And for me, what was important was that the 2 LP, like, you'd buy the 2 LP, and I know they change the set every night, but you'd buy the 2 LP and you'd hear most of the songs off it. And that's really what a best of is, and with Destiny Calling, other than the acoustic gigs when they supported themselves, they haven't really played it for, pretty much back at least 10 years.
Yeah.
So it didn't feel like it was right for that to be on a best of, a 2 LP best of at least, because the band, clearly don't. So I think that says something about the song, that, it's not one of their favourites, it's not one of their go-to songs. So we had Leviathan on, and then right at the very end, conversation, and I said, well, there's nothing off Yummy off it, given it's a #1 album. So then it was like, okay, well, the logical song to take off for something off Yummy would be Leviathan. And so it was sort of a split vote, Way Over Your Head versus Leviathan. And I voted for Leviathan, but then given I suggested something should have been off Yummy, I couldn't really argue against Way Over Your Head going on. And I think, it's what's really great is you've seen all these Spotify Wrapped and Amazon Music equivalents, and there's so many Way Over Your Head as the #1 track this year.
That was mine.
A lot of people
it was mine as well. Although I only listened to it 9 times because I've listened to enough James offline this year to not want to listen to him on Spotify as well.
No, I don't think you needed that Spotify day.
Yeah. So, so that was the right decision in the end, because it's such a great song. It's such a unifying song, and I think it's one that's going to, sit in the set list for years.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I think just when people come back and do a retrospective when they finished, I think that's going to, one of the later day classics, and sits perfectly on that album.
It does, absolutely. Definitely one of my favourites at the minute to hear live, and it's a nice one to look at the difference between the album version and like the more live version as well, because it has changed a little bit. Yeah. Like all James songs, they do change, they evolve a little bit, and in such a short space of time, I think it has evolved a little bit.
That's why they're such a great band. I mean, that's why, the 3 of us and so many other people go to different gigs, because the songs evolve, the performance evolves. Something happens by accident, like Tim maybe misses an intro and they go round the song again so he can come back in, and they go, well, that was brilliant, let's do that again.
Yeah. And I remember
it's not accidental.
And I remember in the early days of Way Over Your Head, Tim was kind of like circling his hand, like trying to get him to keep going away, or trying to build it more and more. And it went on. It was almost going to become like a new sort of sometimes.
Yeah, and I defend. I don't like that sort of when they try and get people to sing along. I think it's much better when it's spontaneous.
Yeah.
and the song either hits or it doesn't.
Seems to hit a lot more now, because I remember they used to introduce it like on the Yummy tour as everyone's next favourite song.
Yeah.
And it has become that.
The songs do their own work, and it's. I'm not an artist, but I know enough artists who go. It's like the big song, and it's like it isn't, and because you're listening to it with the benefit of distance. There's a song on the newest Ist album, and I've been listening to that for a while. And they recorded 11 songs, and there's 10 on the album. And the 11th song for them was most obvious single.
Right.
But they had it as the 11th song, and myself and a few other people close to them sort of put them right on it. And it's been released as a single. So, it's interesting that, I think at times are too close to things. I think Tim talked about it in the interviews.
Yeah.
It came across as like, I didn't listen to it, I've not listened to it. But actually, you can be too close to it.
Mm-hmm. No, of course.
And sometimes it's good that, you've got somebody who's got a little bit of distance, who understands the band, understands the ethic of the band, but has a little bit of distance. And, their management team are very good with that now. The management team are fans of the band, but they're also very good managers.
Yeah.
And I think that's really key. And I think that's contributed quite heavily to them, to this sort of rise that they've had again. They were doing okay, but it feels like the last 2 or 3 years that they're sort of in the ascendancy again.
Yeah, they seem to have went to a completely they seem to have skyrocketed, sort of almost post-COVID.
And,
it seems to have just went crazy.
And they're selling, and Tim says this in every interview, they're selling more tickets than they ever have, and it's true. They sold out Co-op, and and there's some pretty big bands going there and not selling it out because it's 20,000 odd tickets.
Well, I know, even post-COVID in Newcastle, they were always doing it at the City Hall, or they were doing it in smaller venues in the UK now. Yeah. I'm a bit people say it was, they're going to do. It's like people who I know in the Northeast, they're going to do the City Hall again. I love that venue, and it's like, no, probably not, because they can fill an arena.
And it's difficult because touring's got so expensive now.
Yeah.
That you need the numbers.
Yeah.
You travel around watching gigs, and the price of hotels 10 years ago.
Well, we were looking when the tour was announced. We were in America at the time, and we sat one night, and we just looked up basically on the map and right, where can we avoid hotels just to save money?
Yeah.
Is it cheaper to drive through the night?
They were like 40 quid, didn't they? And now they're like 100 and something quid. It's insane.
Yeah. It's crazy, and and you can find bargains, but then you're a bit away from the venue, and
we do sometimes do that. We'll look and think, right, is there a decent car park nearby?
Yeah.
Because I don't drink, so I'm happy to drive after a gig, and it's easier just the mobility. And if we can drive, say 10, 20 minutes away, that's fine. We did that in Halifax. We had to do that in Halifax because
Halifax.
There was so little hotel in Halifax.
But you expand that out to the size of the crew, the size of the band. Yeah. It's massive in terms of additional cost.
Yeah,
and and it's you hear people going, you're ripping the fans off. It's like, well, no. If you understand the cost of touring, the fact that you don't make money from albums anymore, an album will sell 25,000 copies. If you say take an average price of 20 quid, that's £500,000. By the time you've recorded and manufactured an album, there's not an awful lot left there. And just the challenge with James of there being 9 of them, they don't all live in the same place. They can't record in the studio and go home.
No.
The recording of an album is people got to travel somewhere, they've got to stay in a hotel. It's just a very expensive business. And there are things within the ticketing industry that, the booking fees and things like that.
Yeah.
But I think it's a bit unfair to level that at the band because it's an expensive business.
I think they do really well with their ticket prices. I mean, my brother's going to see Ed Sheeran this weekend, and it was something like £125.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have a band, and there's 9 of them, and the light show and the production.
Yeah, and you're in an arena. You don't want to put on a cheap and nasty show, do you?
No.
You can't get away with it because the person who sat in the top tier at the back isn't going to see anything.
No, absolutely.
So there's all that challenge. And and it's finding a real balance. And I'm sure they'd love to play places like the Ritz and Barrowlands and City Hall.
It would just sell out instantly.
Economically, it doesn't work, and it's the music industry is broken.
Yeah,
Spotify are making billions. Ticketmaster, Live Nation are making huge amounts of money, and artists are struggling. And James are fortunate that they've got a dedicated fan base that's still connecting with them, and they're able to bring a younger audience as well. There's a lot of people whose parents got into James, who've grown up listening to the band, and it's good because they come with a different perspective.
Well, that's how I got into them, because my mum was a fan. When she was young, I grew up with it. Then I got obsessed.
But the people
audience now in the UK anyway.
And the good thing is those people have come. They're not reliving their youth.
Yeah.
They're not sort of wanting to hear the whole of Gold Mother or Seven or Laid. They know and love those songs, but they come in with a different perspective. Songs, something like Moving On.
Yeah.
Is an old, to them, if they've discovered the band in the last 5 years, there's not a great deal of difference between the likes of Moving On, Curse, Nothing But Love, and, Sit Down, Come Home, Laid, because they're things they've discovered later.
Yeah, it's all isn't it?
And then there's always the excitement of something new.
Of course.
And I think that's the key is, sorry, my power cable's falling out. There's that excitement of something new, and, and there's the one thing that I miss about James is them playing new songs live.
Yeah, we were discussing this.
I totally get it. It's because there'll be somebody there with a video camera on the internet, and it'll be online within an hour of them coming off stage.
I remember, was it 2017? I want to say was the last time.
Yeah, was that when we got Trouble?
Yeah, Trouble, the original version of Many Faces, and I want to say there was another one.
Yeah, I mean 2018 they did that tour before the album came out.
Yeah,
but that's really the last time they've done that in any sort of significance. And it's really sad because songs develop. Sometimes better, sometimes songs don't work. So you think of things like Not So Strong or Traffic.
Great songs when you've heard
when you heard them live, but then they never sort of made it to the studio, and I think we lose out on that.
Yeah.
The good thing is we've had things like Pudding. That was a really nice insight into the band and how those songs develop. It'd have been quite nice to have heard that level of version of songs from Yummy that actually made the record what they sounded like at the time, at that stage of the demoing process. And I think we saw that with Hallelujah Anyhow.
Yeah.
Pieces of Drum. And it's a really cool evolution of the band's songwriting. And it's an insight you don't often get.
There is.
Bands tend to be, they write songs in different ways, but they tend to be protective for that part of the process.
But I remember they did this very similar thing with All the Colours of You when that came out. You got you download before you got Life, which I think was a very early version of Magic Bus.
Yeah. The 4 that were, and one of them was Life. I can't remember what it was.
Life
it
was,
was one of them.
yeah.
And it's really fascinating to listen. I think different with Pudding because those songs never made it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like Activist song has about 5 songs in it, I reckon.
Yeah.
You know, because it moves from one place to the next, and there's potentially 4 or 5 songs in there. And,
yeah, that could be picked up and split up. Yeah.
And there's Your Story was like one of the B-sides on Waltzing Along. In the Whiplash sessions, that's like half of another song.
Yeah.
That was in the demo, and they sort of picked that bit out and put it into another song, which is really sort of. I'm guessing a lot of people who just want to come and listen to the big hits are not interested in that. But you know, when you're selling 1,000 albums and and the multi-formatting's in there, you really need to be giving people product that's new and interesting.
Mm-hmm.
You see bands do like an album. I think it was the Cage recently. Their #1 album had like 32 different versions of it, and most of them had the same content. And if you're asking people to buy multiple copies of the same thing, you should really be giving them something different.
Yeah, and I suppose James
and
Brown
it's a balance. It's a real balance. It's difficult because the charts are important still, but the way they're calculated is a mess.
Yeah,
so
definitely. It's the industry's changed so much since the days before digital downloads because you pretty much had a. That would be it.
But I think it said I'd listened to 20 albums last year, and it's like that's 20 albums start to finish on Spotify.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a great deal, and obviously I play stuff on record and occasionally on CD, or I listen to it on my phone through my iTunes library. But people are not listening to full albums as much as they used to, and that's a negative for bands like James, who an album's a body of work. The singles are not necessarily the best representation of the album, but there's something that people think will get played on radio. Like Way Over Your Head wasn't a single. They had Is This Love, Our World, Life's a Fucking Miracle, or Life's a Shocking Miracle. But you'd argue Way Over Your Head has connected much more than those songs. Same with Leviathan. That wasn't really a single, but you look at that album, and that song connected much more than anything that was a single off that record. So it's difficult, It's as an artist and as a manager of an artist, you're constantly making decisions that you're doing for commercial reasons rather than artistic reasons. And it's difficult, It's like, particularly about principles.
I think it's like James's like B-sides as well. They just seem to. The sort of always kind of said that sometimes their B-sides are some of their best songs.
Yeah, I mean, to me,
to
me, if you made an album of the B-sides off Millionaires, I'd rather listen to that than the album. That album, there's All Good Boys and I Defeat are on the best of. And, quite deserve their place on there. I mean, I wouldn't say All Good Boys is a single, but it's
good song, though.
It's clearly a song the band love. And I Defeat, I mean, yeah, that should have been a single.
Yeah. I Defeat's just such a lovely, especially with the vocals of Sinead O'Connor on it.
Yeah.
It's just
again,
that was B-side.
Yeah, the band's principles, they put, I don't know, I wasn't party to discussions, but you can imagine it's like, we don't want to be known for a duet.
Yeah, and that's understandable.
But it's such an incredible song.
Yeah.
And Sinead's just an incredible musician, incredible vocalist. Yeah. It just works.
And I think now they're in the position where they can do those sort of songs with the vocals of Chloe.
Yeah,
which obviously in the 90s they didn't have Chloe, obviously, but now they do. You're getting more of those songs like Hallelujah Anyhow. Her vocals on that are fantastic.
Yeah. And I think Chloe's just changed. I mean, you see the interaction between her and Tim, but she just brings something to the band that they were missing.
Yeah.
They probably didn't realise they were missing it, but
she is absolutely incredible. And just when obviously because she came into the band and she was just covering for Debbie and she was at the back on drums.
Yeah,
and then
but
it's
brought something different, because they'd done La Petite Mort, which is a real sort of, I think in the fan base that's recognised as possibly the best of the post Reformation albums up to Yummy. Girl was a difficult one because it was sort of Larry was leaving during the writing of it and recording of it. Living in Extraordinary Times was a pretty strong record.
Yeah.
All the Colours of You was COVID.
Yeah. So that was a difficult one.
The way it was recorded was interesting, but out of necessity. And it just felt that Chloe and Debbie, to be fair, it's just an injection of something different and revitalised them.
Yeah.
And, I talked about management being a key in terms of improving where they're going and their trajectory. I think those two coming in as well. There's a real energy now on stage.
Oh, absolutely.
It's not seven blokes in their 60s.
No.
It's brought an energy, and the great thing about James that's always been there is that they feed off each other.
Yeah.
And having that youthful energy on stage just brings all that out. And it's great, it's sort of I think it's extended the lifetime of the band. I think,
definitely.
I think maybe, because there's a point where they're going to stop.
Of course.
I think Tim said something in an interview about, they're going to do it till they die, but there's a point where it becomes really difficult to do it physically or
especially with all the traveling and stuff like that. I don't really think about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. It's like,
we travel and do.
Yeah, and it's bad for us.
Imagine. Yeah. Me and Laura, we did 5 days on the American tour, and we were knackered.
Yeah.
Some of our days off, we literally just stayed in bed. Like, we were so tired.
Yeah. No, and it's
when there's a gig in the evening and you've got to get a flight at like 6 a.m.
Yeah.
Those sort of days.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a bit better for them with the tour bus, I guess, but then obviously like Sol and Jim on the bus, so they're driving in the night and stuff.
And the bus isn't comfortable. I mean, I've slept on a tour bus a few times, and it's somewhere to get your head down. But that's it. It's
not you're not getting a full night's rest.
Yeah, and hotels, I said you do traveling. It's like you sleep in a different bed every night. That's not conducive to good sleep and good rest. And I think what people do is you get to the end of the tour and then you have a week where you just like completely deflate.
Yeah, definitely. So, shall we have a little run through of Nothing But Love, the definitive best of? So, start at the top. Obviously, What's the World?
Yes. I mean, these songs need to be out there. They're the songs that, were the start of James, when they were, Paul was still in the band. And there's a real energy and youthfulness and sort of, it's a spirit in there.
Yeah.
It's 2 minutes long. It's sort of gone before you've almost got into it, but it's such a great energy. And I think those songs, the early songs, Hymn from a Village, Chainmail, and, going into Johnny N in so many ways, and like, there was much part of the story. And, and I've seen a few sort of people post their best ofs, and, and the best of a band's songs is different to everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone's got a favourite.
If I did my own personal best of, it wouldn't be the 58 songs on those 3 CDs. A big chunk of them would be on it, but there'd be some that weren't. But I think I've seen a few lists where there's nothing like prior to Gold Mother or prior to Strip Mine.
Yeah.
And I think that's doing those early songs a disservice.
Yeah, I think if I did mine, it wouldn't have as much Stutter and Strip Mine in. But I'm really glad that the songs are on there. It shows like a real rawness to James. And it's just a style of James that I sort of missed from not being born.
Yeah. Which is probably the best excuse you can have.
Yeah. But you sort of like attach yourself to songs and like obviously people that were there for that era.
Yeah.
Probably think of it like really fondly.
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably have like Really Hard on my list.
I think we said that as well. We would have liked that.
Maybe Black Hole, but that's a personal choice, isn't it? It's like imagine putting Black Hole on the radio. People are it's really difficult, but I see a lot of people going, oh yeah, this is what I'd have done. Why is that song not on? Why is this song not on? And it's like it's a commercial release at the end of the day.
Yeah, you've got to think about it a bit differently.
So it's got to be singles with bits of the songs that are key to the story.
Yeah,
and I think if you go through, the songs that are on the albums, Johnny, it weren't singles. Johnny N, they still play that. They open with it. Yeah. People complain when they don't play it. The Rough Trade version of Sit Down, I think, is really nice to have on there.
It's really nice to have that on. Yeah,
it's such a nice version.
And some people, about it. And people will now see where that lyric comes from that Tim sings in the second verse.
It's not really as fun, though. I do like to see people.
No.
It's the funniest bits yet, especially when there's like lesser James fans around. Like, you can see them like getting confused. It's like, this is how it's played live.
Yeah, it's nice, and hopefully the full version will come out somewhere at some point, because that 12-inch is a really great, fun 8 minutes of music, and a million miles away from the version that came out in 1991. So I think it was important those songs were on. It was a bit more difficult talking about the 2 LP. I'd have had What For on a 2 LP if I'd have had an absolute free choice, because I loved that song and I don't think they'd play it enough.
No, they don't.
But again, it's personal choice.
It's one that I'm really hoping is going to come back for the next tour. I think.
Yeah, it's difficult because the band, they talk very, openly about songs have to excite them.
Yeah.
And it's probably one of those songs that's quite euphoric in the audience, but maybe doesn't have avenues for them to explore different ways of playing it as much.
Yeah.
No, did they do it acoustically last time? Was it on the Girl Tour?
They have done it like stripped back with a cello.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's as I said, it's hard because they've got 400 songs. It's picking which ones you want. Which ones you want to play are really difficult because everyone will have a favourite. There are songs that certain band members don't like. Tim, there's songs that he doesn't like the lyrics.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very difficult to persuade him to play those songs.
Mm-hmm.
Or they're about certain parts of things that have happened that he doesn't really want to go over again.
Yeah, of course.
And The Lake is one that Tim loved and the rest of the band didn't like, and it's very loved by the fan base. But I think getting it together other than with the orchestra probably wouldn't work.
Well, we heard it in the sound checks in America. It was pretty much played every sound check, and it was quite confusing to hear without the orchestra. It still sounded like the album. It was basically just hearing it from the album.
Yeah, and I mean, 10 Below was a bit like that. There's a few songs that came after the orchestra tours. They tried to play without the orchestra. I think 10 Below was one.
I love 10 Below.
And the Hello, I think they've tried to do. and first orchestra tour, there was a few songs as well. And they didn't quite have the same impact. Sometimes it's the choir, like Medieval, where everyone's chanting "We Are Sound."
Medieval's
fantastic. Replicate that with a 9-piece band, even though 4 or 5 of them could sing that bit. It doesn't quite work.
Yeah.
So we moved way off topic there. So
yeah.
I think I was just trying to avoid us going through 58 songs one by one.
Oh my God, no, we're not doing that. Like, we were talking about the early songs, weren't we? Early song-wise, I'm really glad So Many Ways made it.
Yeah.
I don't feel like that gets
that as well.
Yeah, I know, and I think Tim described it in the booklet as like our first pop song, and it probably was. It was sort of them trying to change, because they were on a big label then who were trying to make them commercial. The Smiths were just about to implode. There was a throne there, as he refers to in Burn, that was vacant. So write something that's going to get you on the radio and in the charts.
Yeah.
And that was a difficult period for the band. I think when Gav left, it was there was a lot of where are we going, what are we going to do, and weirdly they sort of stumbled across it when they started writing Sit Down and Come Home and things like that. They sort of stumbled into that thing that had an audience, and 1989, 1990 was the right time. They were the right band in the right place with the right songs for that era.
That's the end of part 1. We'll be back with part 2 of 3 Fans Clapping very soon. In the meantime, please make sure you are following us on all of our social media to keep up to date with everything to do with Shooting Our Mouths Off and, of course, James.